So our presentation is called We Are All Ordinary Men. It's about neuroplasticity and epigenetics. And we're going to start with a little bit of a case study, and then we're going to talk about how it relates to management. So this started when last summer our football team went to Germany, and part of that trip is we visited Dachau concentration camp. So before we went there, I decided it would be a good idea to learn a little bit about how something like that could happen. So I read this book by Christopher Browning called Ordinary Men. And it went through the story of this group called Police Battalion 101. And this was a group of middle-aged men, about 39 years old on average. And they were just ordinary dudes, teachers, shop owners, bakers, movie theater owners, just regular people. They didn't have any criminal history or mental health history, anything like that. And they sent these men to Poland that was already occupied. And their job was to carry out a large part or some part of the Holocaust in Poland. And as it started, there were three types of men that emerged. The first group, they were really eager to do the job of killing the Jewish people. And then most of the people kind of went along to get along. They weren't like, let's go and do it, but when it came down to it, they did what they were told. And then there was a smaller group, and it was usually less than 5% of the men who would refuse to kill these innocent civilians because they believed it was wrong. And surprisingly, like, you would think that if you refused this, that there would be some type of punishment or beating, like they were forced to do this, but that was not the case, actually. And instead, these men who refused were just told to stay back, and they would clean the mess hall or the bathrooms or something like that. So throughout their time in Poland, Police Battalion 101 murdered over 83,000 innocent civilians in Poland, starting down in Józefów and working their way north. And really the sad part of this is some of these eager killers would spend their free time hunting Jewish people and hiding in the woods and killing them for sport, which is really just horrible to think about. But the crazy thing is, after this, all of them went back to their former way of lives. They didn't engage in any significant criminal behavior after this, and they were just normal functioning members of society, which is strange to think about, but also makes sense when we look back and realize they were just ordinary men. And this brings us to St. Maximilian Kolbe. Now, he was a Catholic priest in Poland during World War II, and he started a monastery where he saved over 2,000 Jewish people and published many anti-Nazi papers. And for this, he was eventually arrested and taken prisoner and sent to Auschwitz, where one day they were rounding up people to starve at the camp, and they selected this father, and he pled with the guards that he had a family and they shouldn't kill him. So St. Maximilian Kolbe volunteered to take this man's place. And the thing is, they tried to starve him, no food or water for 2 weeks, and he still wouldn't die and was still alive after this. And they eventually killed him by lethal injection. So we have these two types of ordinary men during World War II. There was nothing special about either of them genetically or neurologically that made them different from any of us, but their choices ultimately determined who they would become. And one group of people went on to murder innocent civilians, and this other man went on to save over 2,000 lives and eventually give himself up to save the life of a father. So we're going to talk about how the neuroplasticity effects of this affects Generation Z in the workplace. So we've heard from different managers and different presentations that Generation Z employees are often maybe less motivated, not as driven, not willing to work extra hours, and kind of dissatisfied with their jobs and careers. So you might wonder, like, why is this? Why is this? And I mean, it's not some type of genetic phenomenon. There hasn't been some major shift in human genetics in the past 20 years that makes us less productive or hardworking than the people that came before us. So it's got to be some type of nurture effect, some type of way that we are brought up. So two of the possible explanations for this are self-esteem and safe space culture. So when we were growing up, we were all in elementary school, and you get your teacher that comes in and gives you the self-esteem presentation, talking about how in order to be happy, you just need to feel good about yourself. However, this has shown to not be effective at raising productive members of society and actually improving our life satisfaction. So there was this study done with college students who were getting either D's or F's in their courses, and they received one of two messages. The first group received a self-esteem affirmation message that told them that they were capable of achieving success and that they were good enough, and that students who get good grades because they feel good about themselves. The second group received a message saying that the reason they were failing the class was their fault and that they weren't trying hard enough, and if they only studied more and tried their best, that they could earn a good grade. And the results of this study showed almost all of the students who received the self-esteem message continued to do poorly in their classes. However, in the group that received the message calling them to become better, more of those students ended up passing the class with a decent grade. And some of the other myths about self-esteem, it does not actually lower teenage alcohol and drug abuse. And another myth, low self-esteem is not linked with bullying, actually. Bullying, we've been shown, is caused by too high self-esteem, not too low self-esteem. And then the second part of this is safe spaces. Now, safe spaces have been brought up with very good intentions to kind of protect us from ideas or words that might be harmful and cause some psychological distress to us. However, new research has shown that these safe spaces actually increase neuroticism, negative emotion, and specifically anxiety. Now, that's not something you want if you're going to be a productive, outgoing, functioning member of society. And neurophysiologically, when we look at what the concept of something like a safe space does, it's the avoidance of adversity and difficult topics. And this reprograms our brain to, when we encounter or face something difficult, to avoid it instead of facing it head on. And that brings us to the effects of neuroplasticity and epigenetics. So neuroplasticity is this idea that your brain is dynamic and can change based on your environment and your choices. So this is really cool because it shows that our brain adapts to be the most successful it can be in our environment, and it adapts to the choices that we make. So choices we make can actually affect the neurological structure of our brain. And furthermore, epigenetics, so you can kind of think of your DNA as a giant instruction manual. However, your body doesn't use all of it and only picks out specific pages that it's going to use. And now we're learning that epigenetics can change based on our environment and our choices. So we can actually change who we are physically through epigenetics. And the cool thing about that is now we've learned that there's a possibility that our epigenetic traits can be inherited by our children. So this only makes them all the more important because our choices not only affect us, they affect our children, our grandchildren, and all the people that will come after us. So the good part about this is our brains aren't set in stone. Our brains aren't set in stone in the avoidance mindset and the self-esteem culture that we've been brought up in. So because of neuroplasticity, we also have the ability to change that. And we have the possibility to become some of the world's worst people or some of the world's best people. So let's look at more of how that affects management. So one of the big concepts that we're going to look at is the voluntary confrontation of challenge. So this is kind of the opposite of what a safe space would be. So instead of avoiding different topics that are difficult or challenges that we might have to overcome, this calls for us to face them head on voluntarily. Because when we have healthy amounts of adversity, that leads to growth and positive changes in our neurophysiological structure. And the voluntary part of this is when we take on these challenges voluntarily rather than involuntarily, this puts our brain in kind of a problem-solving response. Whereas if we're forced into these challenges, our brain can engage in sort of a threat response, and it's not going to be as effective or healthy for promoting positive neurophysiological change. So that brings us to goal setting. So with that, we need to set small goals that we are capable of achieving. And the thing is, the progress towards these goals actually releases a neurochemical in our brain called dopamine, which is going to reinforce that neural pathway of striving forward and make you not only better suited to achieve that goal, but better suited to achieve other goals outside of that. So by setting goals that are difficult but attainable, we can actually change the structure of our brain to be able to solve other problems unrelated to that one as well. So how should we structure goal setting and management? It's first of all important that when we set goals to put them just out of the reach of our employees' current abilities. Because if you set a goal that's too easy, then it's not going to really make your employees strive to do something outside of it, and it's going to be too easy. And if it's too hard, then we're just going to be overwhelmed and might shut down and not achieve any progress. And the second thing with this is it's essential to achieve buy-in from your employees when setting goals. Because if you don't achieve that buy-in, that's going to engage that threat response we talked about before, and it could just cause your employee to shut down and then not achieve anything. And again, it is the progress towards this goal that is going to help your employee improve and become more productive and more efficient. So that also comes to a big part of management is how should we view our employees? And we have all different types of employees. There's always those that are very productive, okay, and then those who are kind of slacking and aren't as productive. And from this, I've come to think that we should view all of our employees as capable of being some of the greatest people that have ever lived. Because they do have that capability. You have that capability, I have that capability. We all do. And because there's nothing genetically that vastly separates us from some of the greatest people in world history. And by harnessing the neuroplasticity aspect of this, your employees and you can become some of those greatest people that have ever lived. And it doesn't mean they are right now, because like what do we know? We're not all that we can be right now, but we have that potential within us. And when we lovingly push our employees forward, not because we need to get certain productivity numbers out of them, but because we actually care about them as human beings, and we want them to not only be more productive, but to be better people, that is how we can really bring out the best in the people that manage us, the people that we manage, which ultimately is a major part of management, because of course we're supposed to manage productive employees and create profit for the business, but And also a key function of management is to bring out the very best in the people around you. So, wrapping up, we are all ordinary men and women, and the greatest people in world history, the world's greatest warriors, saints, leaders, we're all also ordinary men and women. But then when we look at it, some of the world's worst people were also just ordinary men and women. So we have to recognize that both ourselves and our employees have the potential to be either of those. So with that being said, we should set goals for ourselves and our employees that are aimed upward at the good and strive to be the best that we can be in every aspect of our lives, especially management, because imagine how much better the world could be if just a few more of us strived and dared to reach our true potential and brought out the potential within those around us. Thank you, guys.